CIA, or if you're an admiral, based in Norfolk. And can you imagine kind of what a weird mindset you've got to be going through when you're suddenly saying, okay, we got a new president, and we've got a new foreign policy. And here's the plan on the new foreign policy. Russia is our friend, and Canada is our enemy. That wouldn't make a Saturday Night Live skit. But in fact, that is our policy. And while we see this activity in the Middle East, we also, my view, and I think the vast majority of Americans also agree with this. If we walk away from the Ukrainians' fight against aggression and what they've been able to do to turn back so many of the Russian forces, we will see Putin not stop with Ukraine. Poland and the Balkans. And this transactional nature is just not the way we ought to have America's leadership in the world. And God knows, the world does need strong American leadership. It needs American leadership that's moral, that is economically strong, militarily strong. And one of the things that has always made us strong is the fact that our military is well respected. It is also non-political. Donald Trump is increasingly using our military as a political prop. Whether it's sending in the Marines to Los Angeles totally inappropriately, whether it's giving a political speech at Fort Bragg, whether it was his parade last Saturday, thank God that Army played it relatively straight and didn't allow this to be turned into some kind of celebration. But when you start to politicize our military, we've seen that in other nations, and that is a huge, huge challenge. The question, I'm going to get to the bill in a moment. First of all, how many of you either know somebody or personally been affected by Doge in the country? It's pretty remarkable. I mean, it's obviously everybody in Northern Virginia is about the same 90% plus in Charlottesville last week. I'll tell you, a smart Doge would have made a heck of a lot of sense. I can tell you there's a lot of places, really proud of the fact that when I was governor of Virginia, was named best managed state. There are ways we can save additional money. But I will give you odds on a bet that at least during the tenure that Elon Musk was there, that effort will end up costing the American taxpayer money. We've seen that it's one thing if you want to fire a coder at Twitter and you can rehire somebody else. You fire an air traffic controller, a food inspector, health department official. These are not fungible jobs that you can just replace with somebody off the street. And we are going through that process as well. As opposed to efficiency, it is the Department of Inefficiency. And these 22-year-old Doge boys, it is one of the things I've got a bill in now that says if you are taking any of the public information and sticking a thumb drive into our computers, we're going to dramatically raise all of the penalties and frankly put jail time, because that is not Elon Musk. You've taken some of the good points already. But beyond what Ghazal and Schuyler and Jen have said, I'll just give you kind of my top point of view on this. First of all, one of the things that's not been hit is all of the clean energy tax credits. I very much believe that and this is something I've come to a conclusion over the last few years, as someone who's got a tech background, and you look at the challenge around AI and all these other things. In many ways, the country that will be the most important in the 21st century is who's got the most energy. And we need to think about all of the above on energy. And I frankly think we're not going to get it all of the above. And some folks will probably disagree with me on. But if we take a fresh look at nuclear and SMRs, and frankly because they are carbon-free. But the idea that you're going to suddenly roll back, I saw this morning, this crowd wants to basically go in and sell all the electric vehicles the post office bought. At a deep discount, by the way. if this god-awful, mean-spirited, cruel bill gets through, Virginia alone will lose 21,000 jobs. And we've got, we'll give Trump credit for this, he is a little bit ecumenical at times of who he screws. But most of the development projects that we were to receive grants for are in some of the most reddest parts of Virginia. So we need to fight that. That's in the big awful bill. Healthcare has already been mentioned. 16 million Americans losing their health care, and as I'll mention in particular, it's like, this is not just about Medicaid. This is about those of you who are to buy health insurance over the exchange, through the exchange. I don't think you realize if you buy health insurance on the exchange, and there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Virginians, those rates are going to be reset in September. And come November, maybe about the time that we elect a new governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, you're going to see your monthly health insurance rates go up between $700 and $900 a month. And what's that going to mean is that you might say, well, that's fine, Warren, but you know what, I get my health insurance a different way. It doesn't matter, because if you disrupt that whole marketplace, everyone who gets their insurance through their employers, their rates are going to go up as well. And it's not like people aren't going to get sick. People are going to simply show up at the emergency room and drive up costs further. One of the things that I've been involved with since the early 90s, I'm really proud of the fact that I started the Virginia Healthcare Foundation. How do we deal with the uninsured? We are at the lowest percentage of Virginians without any healthcare coverage today than ever in our history. This bill takes place. We will go back to pre-Obamacare. There were good things and bad things on Obamacare. We didn't get it 100% right. But does anybody really want to go back to the 2005, 2006, 2007 timeframe? Food assistance. Food assistance. 200,000 Virginians would lose food aid. Do we think it really is smart to cut our kids' school breakfast and school lunches out?
No.
No? And again, that has an effect on agriculture as well as those kids. And to just make this bill, when I think it's just plain cruel, it also cuts food banks. I mean, tell me who's going to close a $37 trillion debt with cutting food banks. And this bill, which is supposed to be fiscally responsible, the new number actually is not $2.5 trillion to the debt. It adds $3.5 trillion to the debt by the time you add in interest. And that debt issue we are going to have to take on, but it has to take it on from both sides of the balance sheet, both the spending side and the revenue-raising side. So the bill is awful, and I promise you, I am going to do everything in my power to kill it. One, it is outrageous what has happened to our immigrant community. You know, you can be for a secure border and still say it is absolutely wrong for ICE officials to grab people off the streets on their way to school, and make sure we actually put a law in place. We call it, obviously, first to be fired. We're trying to put a law in place that says, if you're ICE, you gotta not be masked to the point that all of the immigrant community, but particularly the Latino community. Had 55 pastors on the line the other day. And pretty heartbreaking when you hear the stories of a community that says, I just want to go to work, I just want to go to school. Prince William County up in Northern Virginia, when this started, 30% of the kids stopped going to school. Not because they were undocumented, but because they were scared. So I'm working with all of the churches and seeing if we can, and synagogues, mosques, temples, see if we can match different faith groups together so that if you've got kind of an emergency package, if they show up, if ICE shows up, who do you call, what do you do? It's not enough. I can promise you, we need to get rid of this policy. But it is saying, let's do something on the ground that makes a difference. And the final point is just, and this is the part that is, again, where the thing just makes me crazy. In Trump 1, it was out there, but I actually found ways to work with them. I'm very proud of the fact we got $12 billion for community development financial institutions, because there's a heck of a lot of disparity in our country between access to capital. You know, my background was, first my family graduated from college, you got student debt, came out and started a small business. It failed in 6 weeks. Started a second small business. It failed in 6 months. Ripe old age of 26. I was flat broke, living out of my car, trying to pay back my student debt. But I had a third chance. And I fell into cell phones in 1982. It was a fortuitous fall. But I think I was self-aware enough to realize if I had not been a white guy with the appropriate education, I might not have got that third shot.
That's right.
Sorry,
guys.
Guarantee you success. You sure as heck not to be able to guarantee everybody a fair shot. And that was kind of based on the idea of work hard, you get that shot. What we are seeing out of this crowd is a level of graft and corruption that is unprecedented. I literally thought, this will be the last time because we got to get to the questions. I literally thought, oh my gosh, this was going to finally wake up America. Elon Musk, while he was there as Doge, was sitting in an office in the White House, and his countries came in to try to get tariff relief. And by the way, as a former business guy, there is no business, American or foreign, that's going to invest in America with this uncertainty about what the tariffs are going to be today, tomorrow, next week. But what he would do was, as countries came in, remember this story of the Bangladeshi trade representative. He came over, he met with the trade rep. He was about to leave the White House. The guy said, well, you've got one more meeting. And he takes him into an office, and he's suddenly sitting with the wealthiest man in the world. And that wealthiest man in the world, from the office inside the White House, is saying to the Bangladeshis, they had to get the Bangladeshi president on the phone, if you don't use Starlink, Elon Musk's service, you're not going to get tariff relief. That is corruption on steroids. Same thing happened in India, Pakistan. We are a better country and a better people. So, as people, let's start the questions. But and the thing I just ask them, please keep the faith. We will find a way to get through this. Donald Trump is not going to destroy America. But only if we stand up and fight back against these actions. Yes, sir. If everybody could just say their name and do the question.
Thank you. David Schwartz, Chesterfield County. First off, I want to acknowledge all the great work that you have done and your colleagues for to stand up to some of this. I've been struggling for weeks in how I put this, but do you believe, Senator, that there is value in the Democrats and other opponents of fascism and ignorance of the rule of law in fundamentally re-engineering and redefining how the Democrats and others can get the message out and to get the understanding to the American people that this all has to change. We can't continue down the road we're doing. It's great to fundraise, it's great to do these other things, but do you think there's a value in just another way of getting the American people to take action to not end up in the horrible mess that we seem to be going down to?
Well, David, fair question. And it was coming. I wasn't sure it was going to be the first one. When are you Democrats going to get your act together? And let me take a minute on this. Short answer is, of course. But the idea that we're suddenly going to fix this with a 3-word slogan. I've been doing Democratic politics for a long time. I can remember Clinton's first term and Obama's first term, the economy, stupid, and hope. But I can't think of another Democratic time where there's a 3-word slogan. Frankly, the Republicans do better with 3-word slogans. Make America great, no car tax. And I'm not entirely totally in anguish at this point that we don't have, who the future standard bearers are going to be. One of the things I want to try to do is make sure that I can help sort out and promote younger folks who can be part of this 21st century leadership. Let me also say two last things. One is, I think we have to be more than just simply anti-Trump. Particularly when it comes to judging young people. I think we need a Democratic Party that is pro-growth, that's pro-innovation, that recognizes that technology is here whether we like it or not, and how do we grapple with it, but not let it control us. And also acknowledge, and I say this with trepidation in this kind of crowd, where sometimes, when we were in charge, we became too regulatory. I mean, the slight thing I always like to cite, I was the guy in the room when we did the infrastructure. We got $42 billion for broadband. Not a penny of that was spent out during President Biden because we had so many regulatory hoops to jump through. It's one of the reasons why I'm so enthralled with what you guys are trying in RICO, which is trying to, in a sense, deregulate the process to how we get more affordable housing. We have to recognize that at the end of the day, put your hands over the young lady's ears over there. It can't be simply what we talk about. We got to get shit done. And that means how it affects people's lives. And I think we have been not afraid of the future, but forward-leaning. I mean, this is a great turnout. I just wish it was half filled with people under 35. So, if I was a really, I've been doing this long enough, if I was a really good politician, I'd stop there. But one thing, and this I'm sure I'll get some questions on and brief on, but I just got to say, end of the day, I still think it's important to try to work with the folks that we don't agree with. There's not been anything done in the last 7 or 8 years under either the end of Trump or everything under Biden that I wasn't intimately involved in. And they all started with bipartisan groups. And nothing has disappointed me more than these first 4 or 5 months when I have Republican senators, especially on national security, because I give them heck when I'm in a classified briefing. I don't want to personally attack them just in the press. That's the typical politician. But I'm giving it to them. Like, why can't you guys find your voice? And these Republicans, you come to me going, Mark, boy, keep talking about this. This is really important. You make this point. I even had one say, Mark, it's like you're a conscience. I don't want to be your damn conscience. I want you to vote your conscience. And I think what we have to do is we don't have to have 47 of us in the Senate, 53 Republicans. I only got to get 4 to find their voice. And I do think the way our system works, I'm going to just keep trying like hell to make sure those 4 find their voice so that we can turn back and not simply have to have all the bad things happen and then recreate after the fact. But thank you for your question. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Sam. Richmond City. Don't look it. I am 27, so bottom line up front, related to that most recent question, I'm just curious, how the opposition is actually going to oppose the current administration, and also once we do regain the majority, what are we actually going to affirmatively do? I have 3 supporting points. I'm a federal contractor. Our entire job with our federal team is to save the taxpayer money. Thanks to DOGE, we lost over half of our federal team. So what are we going to do to protect public servants? I'm looking at someone like Secretary Brainworms. I have childhood diagnosis of autism and ADHD. He's talking about a national registry. A little concerned about that. What are we going to do to push back on the encroaching surveillance state and protect the 4th Amendment? And then finally, how can we as a party push back and not lose our soul in terms of throwing immigrants and trans people and other vulnerable communities? Politics of anger to more aspiration and growth. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. Listen, we got to treat people in public service actually with respect. Maybe I've been doing this a lot, but I remember when the idea that you would go to serve in government or as a contractor, as a noble endeavor, and instead this administration basically treats everybody who does that somewhat like they're a chump. I think that is wrong. I think we have to push back against it extraordinarily aggressively. I think on the question of data and data privacy, it is crazy to me that we don't have a data privacy bill, 10 years in. And this frankly, both sides have been guilty. We should have done it when the Democrats had control. And you think it was hard to run social media. You're talking with AI now, this is an absolute essential. And it's one of the reasons why I'm trying to make sure the Doge boys, if they steal our information, pay a penalty. And then finally, the thing about America has always been, we're hopeful, aspiration. We try to take care of each other. I think, on the immigration issue, our secret sauce has always been, you come to this country no matter where you may have been born, you take that oath, you take an oath not to our country, you take an oath to the Constitution. That's the same thing our military does. But you're American then. And we've seen the benefits of that, particularly in Virginia. A quarter of our businesses, at least in Northern Virginia, are first-generation Americans. Because the truth is, we lose that secret sauce. I can move to France tomorrow, I'm never going to be French. So I think we need to not only make a moral argument, but I think we need to make an economic argument that this makes us strong. Thank you for the question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I am a contract grant writer for nonprofits all across the country. I do work with organizations that provide health care, feed people. And the grant cuts are going to kill people. How do we make our voice heard? I know we're kind of preaching to the choir when we use 5 calls for you and Senator Kane and Delegate McClellan, but I just feel like I'm screaming into a void. How do we get heard?
I wish I could tell you what you just said is not true. And we are just at the very front end of this. This is not filtered through the system yet. And then you take the completely anti-science bias of Bobby Kennedy. And who in the heck would have ever thought in 2025 America would move away from science? Or the fact that we're cutting research on it. My mom's family had Alzheimer's. I'm more than a little concerned about that. You're taking the biggest study we ever had on Alzheimer's and are stopping it, 10-year study after 7 years. That's flushing the money down the toilet. So what I would say is, yes, you need to get on Jen and me, but I'd argue 2 things. One is that I would have thought they would have broken already on the national street. They haven't yet. I think you need to make sure that your Republican local elected officials here is right. You may have, congresswoman and senator and stuff, but you need to let the boards of supervisors, the boards of education, the state delegates, the state senators. The thing that's happening is many of the communities are communities that voted for Donald Trump, 75% plus. To give you an example, in Southwest Virginia, I won't say the county, in Southwest Virginia, there was a county that is about 95% white. Their high school scholars, they took their high schools and they ripped out all their computers because, this hear me out. It's not irrational. They ripped them out because they had gotten a grant from the Biden administration to up their technology. All good so far in this work, until they realized the way they applied for the grant, they called the grant a digital equity grant. So the Doge bros chopped the money because it had the word equity in it. You talk about political correctness on steroids, and I think these communities, we've got to make sure this pain is not just focused on this community or parts where Democrats are better. It is across the board. So we have to do that, and that's where Republican local elected officials need to put that word going up. But we also have to, and this is harder. We all got to get out of our own foxholes at times. I bet there's not a person, and I'm part of this, that doesn't have a family member or friend that voted for Trump. And have those tougher conversations. Is this what you wanted? People may have said, well, we wanted a secure border, we wanted prices going down. Well, prices are not going down. And this dismantling of America, I just think on that one-to-one basis, because how do we get our voices out? In the old days, 10 years ago, people still read the newspaper and watch TV news. They don't anymore. So we have to reinvent ourselves through how we use social media. I'm doing as much social media as anybody in politics right now to try to meet people where they are. And frankly, a lot of folks, I found you've got to meet them not starting with politics, but starting on another issue. I'd love to say that my biggest social media hit was some brilliant exposition scholar on housing. It was not. It was a really gross tuna melt I made in the first 6 weeks. I'm trying to leverage that into getting on food blogs. Because I think, again, this is something that the other side did brilliantly and caught us asleep. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm sorry. My name is Dawn Stern. In 2015, I was diagnosed with a very rare cancer that occurs in about 500 to 1,000 people a year. When I was diagnosed, there were no chemotherapies that would stop this cancer. Luckily, they were able to remove it, but it may or may not be back. Something's in my liver, we don't know what it is. In the intervening years, they've come up with one drug that lasts about 2 years. The cuts to NIH, to me, are terrifying because nobody is going to do research. No pharmaceutical company is going to do research on a cancer that occurs in 1,000 people a year. I have 5-year-old grandchildren. I want them to remember me. I want to be alive long enough so that they have memories of me, not just pictures. What are we doing about the cuts to NIH?
That's even worse right now is that as we are driving away these researchers, they're not staying in America. The UK and Germany is saying any of these researchers, we'll hire you. And what's even worse, because I think the major issue of our next 20 years is how we do technology competition with China. China is literally offering 10-year full-paid stipends if you go to a Chinese university. So I think, frankly, many of the industries, pharma included, have been afraid to speak up. We heard some of the numbers we heard about Virginia hospitals. We got hospitals in Virginia that are afraid to speak up until people who are being directly affected raise their voice. We're not going to get there, and we're going to need that folks to raise their voice. And I think about one of the areas that we've not touched on are all the families who got kids with special needs. That is I can tell you, when I was governor, that's a very powerful community. They have to raise their voice. And the thing that's awful is I should not keep going down this, is that once you stop these studies, you can't just restart them tomorrow. So this is again in that category of things that do now that have exponentially greater hurt. So one of the things we're trying to do is get the universities off their duffs. I do have a little more hope today. I think we started to see that bending your knee to this guy, whether you are a university, a law firm, or a business, isn't going to get you relief. It just means, he's still going to screw you. So we're starting to see a little bit of that, but not as enough. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I want to say thank you for all the hard work you do, and you were one of the first letters I was going to vote for. I'm looking at a handwritten letter on my phone that I actually have a letter that was passed down to my aunt. It's from President Jimmy Carter. My aunt Rosalie Carter worked with a lot of presidents, governors, and so forth. And it's a letter even back then where he's saying Dems need to stay with the girl basically who brought them to the dance. So it seems like along the way, the age group 40 and under, you lost a lot of us, not me because I was born and raised in this, but a lot of my age group, they felt abandoned this election. They feel like the Dems don't see them anymore. And when I'm saying that, I'm talking about the group that's in the center, someone like me that's independent. And they just want to know what's going to be done. They don't want to be forgotten about because they're not with MAGA. Also, I have a lot of friends and family, unfortunately, who have been affected by the cuts. I don't want to say the name of the base, but in California, Elon came there in person. Federal employees who have been there for years were threatened, concerned about their job, well-being, having to send emails. It's just kind of ridiculous. Also, sadly, some of those people also voted for this administration, and now they're regretting it. And a lot of them bring up to me a point about President Clinton, that he cut a lot of jobs, and I want the Democrats to have the message that what he did was approved by Congress. It took 2 years. I was young then. I wasn't old enough. My aunt worked with him as well. I have him on here. It's not the same. I feel like the Democrat message is not getting to the people under 40 appropriately. Now, don't get me wrong, Senator, I understand that the media is controlled by a certain group. That was a mass called undergrad, right? Undergrad. And we also don't have social media. It's algorithms and things. But it has to be a way, because you're losing a lot of people that's under 40.
Amen. Well, amen. And you know, what the Democrats are saying is, trying to do that in rural areas, but at least we got young people, brown people, and black people. Well, not so much. So part of that does mean we are behind on how we communicate. We need to be more forward-leaning on, I think, around with all the technology and other tools. And the idea, and this is got to give Trump credit, how this man who was born on third base with a silver spoon has turned himself into a victim.
Yep.
And somebody says, I can relate, but we can either, curse the darkness or get out and fight it. And trying to make sure, and part of what I'm trying to do is making sure, particularly the young people, that have a totally different way of communicating. They're not going to read the newspaper. So, we did promise them money, but yes, but he didn't. And again, some of that is true. Frankly, on the influencers, a lot of them get paid. And so that could be. We could take a couple hours on that conversation, but I want to make sure everybody gets a question.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dexter Oliver. I live in the 4th Congressional District, which Ms. McCullough represents. Do you and/or Ms. McCullough support term limits for members of Congress? And Ms. McCullough, will you sometime in the future consider standing for the nomination of the Democratic Party for President of the United States?
Whoa! Actually, here's my response. I've looked at places where they had term limits. A lot of the western states in the 90s switched and said, all right, this at the state legislative level. You can only serve X years in one body. It didn't improve the politics at all. And frankly, in a lot of states, it made it worse. So I think the best term limit is an informed electorate. If we don't do what you want us to do, fire us. That is got to be the thing. I can tell you this much. I'll probably ask you to hire me one more time, but that will be my last time. And my goal will be to try to make sure there is that next generation. And I do feel like there are a lot of things I know now that I didn't know when I started. And there are a lot of ways I think I can help Virginia now. But again, you got to make that judgment. But then, have an informed electorate, and if people don't produce, at the end of the day, the two value adds I really want to try to bring is one, because I did have a background in technology, how we deal with this long-term competition with China. It will define so many things, and I am deep in this. Two, the fact that anything that has happened recently, I don't think the Democrats in 2026 are going to get 60 votes in the Senate, so I do still think you got to have some folks who are trying to do bipartisan. And then finally, I want to be part of that group, whether it's a Jen McClellan or others, that gives that Democratic Party its future focus. Because one of the things I am concerned about is if we look like we're simply the party of the status quo, or the party that doesn't acknowledge there's a heck of a lot of stuff that government does that could do a hell of a lot better. And we got to break some glass and sometimes make some folks offended because there are efforts, but there is a stupid way to do it, a la Doge, and there are smart ways to do it. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Senator.
I love being a legislator. I love Congress. Maybe one day I'll seek a promotion, but I think I want to stay in Congress. I'll serve where you all think I can best help you.
Good morning, Senator Moore. First, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come out here and talk to us today. We really appreciate it. It's kind of an esoteric subject. I work in IT, and I have been following a company called Plantier and the type of work that they're doing, and especially with the executive order that 47 passed, where all of the agencies have to share data, combined with all of the social media and all of the data that we freely and willingly give these companies. I'm terrified about the type of profiling that AI is going to be able to do on this, and the micro-targeting and trying to influence, and basically propaganda on steroids that could happen. And I'd like some details about, I don't know that we can necessarily stop this with this administration, but after the fact, when we recover, you spoke about a little bit about digital privacy. What does that look like? How do we as Americans control our data? Because it truly is the currency of this century.
Amen. Amen. And I don't want to nerd out on this, but maybe you and I afterwards could nerd out for a while. One of the things we had in the defense world was we had these giant primes that frankly didn't always deliver a great product at an affordable price. And in fact, we've learned one thing from Ukraine: the whole notion of warfare is changing. If we keep building 20th century platforms, you can't even, the tanks you sent in Ukraine, you can't put to the front line because the drone will come and take it out. So you needed something different. So Palantir was like this hot new company, but now it is starting to frankly suck out information. And one of the things I think, if you get the bill passed that says, and there are some Republican libertarians, and I'm not a libertarian, but who I think we can work with this. And we need these privacy protections because we completely screwed up on social media. If we put some guardrails on social media 10 years ago, our kids would be a hell of a lot better. Well, let me give you a really quick idea, and we can visit later. I worry about Congress' ability to keep up. I do wonder if we could put in place a legal framework this could be allowed easier, whether we may be able to actually create personalized AI tools that becomes, in effect, the monitor of your privacy. Whether we can use the technology, frankly, against the technology, but to counter the technology. To actually have, because no matter what law we write, it can't keep up with the technology. So is there a way to, in effect, delegate the privacy controls to an AI agent? And then the question becomes, well, how do you get the AI agent to turn on you? But I think we've got to think outside traditional ways to deal with this privacy issue. And Palantir, I got huge concern. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm a voter from Regency, around here. I want to know your office's stance on the report put out by Human Rights Watch about the torture of Palestinian healthcare workers in Israeli prisons. As Israel's America's ally, I found this a pretty concerning report, and I want to know your
First of all, if you could get me the report, I've not seen it, but if you can get me the report, but I will tell you this, and I have a strong support of this, but what is happening in Gaza, what is happening to the Palestinians is wrong, and the thing that is so disturbing to me, particularly as we go back to what I started talking about with Iran and Israel, there was a moment in time here, if we could get to a ceasefire in Gaza, you could have actually had Saudi Arabia and other states in that region be actually aligned against Iran. Because let's not also pretend that the Iranian regime is not horrible. What they do to their people, remember when there was a young woman in Iran who got killed by the religious police? So I don't want to whitewash what is happening with Iran, but I would love to take a look at the report and I'll give you a full answer. Yes, sir.
Yes, good morning. I want to thank you for coming to meet with us. My name is Vernon. I'm in Riker County. First of all, I want to just comment on how proud I was. The folks of Richmond, 10,000 of us strong. So 1970 was a hell of a long time ago since the last time I had to protest. So 55 years, this country, we didn't have to It's unbelievable. And my wife back here and I, we managed to get the No King shirts, and we have laundered them carefully. The next event, I believe, Indivisible has coming up in July, and it looks like it's going to be a monthly event until we get some of these bills changed. We went live this morning, and after hearing the news this week that 48 years of working to get into retirement, I actually count 100% on my Social Security because I put a lot of money aside for that. And it looks like they're talking now a 28% reduction in 8 years, and I'm 74, but I'd like to be around in 8 years. And a lot of young people would like to get their money turned around. So what if you were to propose a bill to maybe take these wonderful tariffs that are increasing everyone's price and set aside the slush fund, the money that's, I think, hit $35 billion in the second month that it went up so much, and earmarked it all for Social Security, because if that happened, they'd probably just get rid of all this tariff stuff, but we might get some money put into Social Security before they did it.
Well, the thing, here's, I would, if I was good, I would just say, yes, let's do it. But frankly, that tariff money, which by the way, is nothing but a tax on all of us, $2,800 a family. And we have not even seen those because the products you buy at Walmart today were still in a shipping container in February. So this is going to get exponentially worse comes July. But let me, Social Security of all the entitlements is the easiest to fix. What I would say, because it's math. You know, remember Social Security was set up by President Roosevelt in 1934, and he kind of like, he basically said, all right, we're going to give you a check if you hit 65. Well, life expectancy at that point was 62. So I think we need to acknowledge, thank God, that medical science has moved along. And the two things, or this is the first one I'm going to say, we'll get a lot of folks mad at me, but I've said it before. I think for folks that are pick your cut line, under 35, because I've not met anybody under 35 that thinks they're going to get Social Security. So I would say, all right, if we could slowly, the way, frankly, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan did in '83, if you can slightly raise the age requirement a couple years over the next 30 years, so you got plenty of time to plan. And obviously, if you work at a job where your body wears out at 65, you should get it there. But the other thing you got to do is you got to raise the damn cap on how much income is taxed. That does not make sense if you're making $1 gazillion that you're only paying tax on roughly $160,000 of your income. You know, you could raise it to $250, raise it to $400. But that is the reverse of what this crowd is trying to do. What this overall awful bill is going to do. I didn't mean to hit you on this one. I'm a capitalist. I believe in the market. But I believe there ought to come responsibility. This bill would take people who are making minimum wage and raise their cost 53%. If you're at the very top, you're going to get a minimum of $400,000 tax break. That is not fair. It is not right. Candidly, it's un-American to have that reverse Robin Hood. But you are going to need, on Social Security, you're going to need more revenues. You cannot just pretend magically this is going to appear. Yes, ma'am.
Well, first, I want to, Senator, just thank you so much for having this town hall. Something that you said triggered me, and my next statement is at top of the that I want to share with you, which is, you made the statement, you wish younger people were here. On March 25th, my nephew was shot 5 times in the back for his car. Every month since then, and I'm a school board member, every month since then, I've lost at least 2 young people, and I lost 2 last night. My question to you is, how can you have the expectation of youth wanting to get civically involved in for their future when they're dying in their present? I say that to you with the utmost of respect, because I do get your personal invitations. I do represent a much younger community to do the best I can to inspire them. But they need to see younger people in office. You cannot. This Democratic Party, this is a plea. This is a beg. I will not give up inspiring our young people. However, this Democratic Party has to recognize the weight that are on our young people's shoulders. Please don't be deceived and think they do not care about civic engagement because they're not in these seats. They need to see someone that looks like them, that can relate to them, and speak to them in a way that makes sense. Postcards, all of these things, they're great, and they speak to the people or the constituents that you want them to get votes. However, if you're going to look into the future, we have got to do a much better job. This is coming from a parent who's lost a loved one. This is coming from an auntie who lost a nephew with 5 bullets in the back. This is coming from a school board member that meets with children often.
Let me, God bless you for being on a school board. Post-COVID, if you're on a school board, no matter what your position is, you're going to get grief. So I thank you for your contribution. And number 2, I believe that I've been willing to call. I got one boatload of grief when I said, as much as I respect you, Joe Biden, it's time for you to go. Matter of fact, Biden called me on national TV and attacked me for saying that. And this idea of how you make this transition, we got it. But we also got to give those young people hope. Part of this comes down to what Skylar and Gonzalo and Jen are doing in terms of education. Part of this comes back to how we give that young person hope that they can have that fair shot. I mean, I spent a ton of time, this is an obscure little piece, but how you have financial institutions that will actually take a chance on lending that money to start a business for somebody that may not look like me. CDFI, about $12 billion from in COVID. We're working now to try to grow this. I was in Newport News yesterday, where a faith and business-based $50 million fund to try to help those young people understand what their opportunities can be. Let me give you one that is even, and this I was sure I was going to get a question, but I'll go ahead and raise it, which is probably many of you will disagree with me. I just worked on a bill in an area that I had a lot of questions on, cryptocurrency, especially with the Trump and the corruption from his family. And a piece of that is something called stable coins that are kind of the effect of you put $1 behind something, it becomes an electronic way to transfer it. And frankly, saves a lot of money on transactions. It was fascinating, the fight inside the Democratic caucus. Every one of the older members, except for me, were against it. Every younger senator, and every black senator, and every Latino senator. Because right or wrong, people think, well, this may be a chance, if I come from a community that's never had a fair shot, to get on the ground floor of something big. So this is not a perfect guy. 18 senators agree with me on Democratic. But the idea that we're going to run from technology advances does not make sense, because young people are going to say, then you don't understand me. We can condemn, and frankly, I'm terrified about TikTok, because I'm afraid that the Communist Party of China can direct what you see. The genius of TikTok is it knows what you like before you know. But you talk about a propaganda tool. But I'm not going to run. And if the Democrats seem like they are last century in terms of their thinking, we're not going to get young people showing up here or showing up to vote. So, but thank you for your service, and I feel for the enormous question. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Colin. I'm trying to do this without too much preamble. I'm 30 years old. I was too young to remember 9/11, but I remember January 6th, which is similar.
All right.
on that day, Donald Trump refused to deploy the National Guard to assist the Capitol. And the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, and the governor of Maryland, who I think was Larry Hogan at the time, ordered the National Guard and state polices to the Capitol. I don't know if that would have happened under a governor like Glenn Youngkin. So this question, it's for all elected officials here, really. But I think the scariest thing that happened about that day is that 5 years on, the Republican Party has learned that there are no consequences for committing treason.
Yes.
And every day I wake up, and the first thing I do is I check CNN to see how much closer are we to crossing the Rubicon in this country. So my question, I guess, is how do we stop that from happening? And if it does happen, I think it's existentially important that Abigail Spanberger is governor of Virginia in January of 2026. Actually, well, yeah, whenever the next president is supposed to be inaugurated, I think it's existentially important not just to the Commonwealth, but to the country that she be in control of the Virginia National Guard. So the question is, if it does happen, what do we do?
Well, I was there at the Capitol on January 6th. I was there when, and it was
So was that.
you could suddenly hear people trying to beat on the doors to get into the Senate chamber. And I called Governor Northam that day and begged him to get the National Guard there. And thank God he and Governor Hogan, no one was a problem. Stepped up and did their job. And the next day, what I wish they would have taken more images of was how these insurrectionists defaced our capital. You can imagine if this had been a Black Lives Movement crowd.
I'll be there.
Frankly, I don't think it would have ever been that disrespectful. So what this reality is something I think about every day. And what we can do is we can litigate. Thank God so far the courts have helped. We can protest. But as long as, unless we are willing to be kind of anti-small d democratic, we still got to convince some folks to join us. And that's where I think, and if you make a judgment one way or the other, on me, but there has been no bipartisan effort since I've been in the Senate that I'm not thinking of. And you do need some people that can talk to those who you may disagree with, but still figure out a way to get to yes. And I'm not ready to give up and say we're going to replace that notion of how democracy. I don't have to convince everybody. I got to convince 4. And it blows my mind that it hasn't happened yet. But then when we do come back, we need to make absolutely clear that, as a former governor, the idea that someone would call out my National Guard and put them in a circumstance where law enforcement wasn't even looking for that is outrageous. So we need to tighten those laws, but I don't think we walk away from the process. It's one of the reasons why I think our willingness to have those conversations with people who supported this guy are really damn important. And that those, I know the man who I can't do it, and I know Skylar Gonzalez, the House is crazy about which teams in control. But I'm not going to say everyone there embraces, not every Republican embraces all of this kind of out of the craziness on the Trump side. We just got to find a way to help them get their voice. And if not get their voice, fire them.
Hi, my name's Emily. I came out from Amelia, Virginia, about a 45-minute drive.
I know where it is.
Yep, we're 10,000 voters. I know that you've been to Amelia in recent history. And I have been personally disillusioned with politics and disillusioned with the Democratic Party up until now. But because we're in the middle of a crisis here, I'm stepping up and taking on a leadership role in my community to help support the Democratic cause. I don't want any allocates or anything like that, but I am concerned because I'm doing a lot of work on the ground with other folks under 35 in rural Virginia. And I know dseCDqn3z5XFj has a long-standing history with our neighbor Powhatan, and Abigail Spanberger has a long history with Amelia. But I'm concerned that the efforts of us young rural Virginians are not going to be reciprocated by the Democratic Party. So it's not really a question here, but a concern. If we're showing up for you, what are you going to do to show up for us?
Many things I can be very validly criticized. But ignoring rural Virginia is not one. I did 10 points better in every rural jurisdiction than virtually any other did, because I've shown up time and again. Because I believe that your future is going to depend on being connected to the rest in things like water. It goes back to bringing some of the tech jobs I brought to Southwest Virginia when I was governor. It goes back and saying, this is where you got to be, I think, future focused. In a connected world, it shouldn't matter where you live. And I think at times that Democrats have not felt comfortable going to those communities. And I remember when I ran for governor, I got a lot of grief from the Democratic elites because I had a bluegrass band, because I sponsored a NASCAR show. No, I didn't change my views, but I said I am not going to disrespect your culture. And the truth is, there have been times when the charge against Democrats that the coastal elitists has had some truth to it. And until we can break that and say we want to meet Americans where they are, Virginians where they are, we're never going to start being competitive in Mississippi and Alabama and Texas. And when I got there, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska, the 6 senators, 5 of them were Democrats. So it's not like we got to go back to the 19th century. We just have to meet people where they are. And again, I think there's not, and these younger elected officials, I think you mentioned Ghazala and Abigail, Jen does it as well. I mean, Skylar, I think that's the future of how we get there. But we have to go. Too many politicians don't want to go someplace where it's not simply an amen crowd. Unless you're willing to go with people who disagree with you, you're not going to get stuff done. Yes, ma'am. We're running down on time, but I want to make sure everybody gets here.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for being here today. Thank you all for being here today. Congresswoman McClellan, future Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi, State Senator Skylar Redwalker, thank you all for being here. My name is Erica Kopp, and I'm a healthcare attorney here in Glen Allen, which means that if the one big ugly bill passes, my job is going to get a lot more difficult. I have seen, leaving court hearings this past week, in fact, from the Richmond City Circuit Court, I have seen Homeland Security in a marked vehicle waiting outside of the courthouse. I have a friend who is a public defender who I went to law school with in Chesterfield County, who has had her clients disappeared from their court hearing. So my question to you is, what actions do you intend to take to protect your constituents while they're attending court hearings lawfully?
Into the communities I found is through the faith base. I'm talking Christian, Muslim, Hindu, across the board. And working with faith leaders so there is, in a sense, if stuff happens, who do you call? And it's one of the reasons I got a lot of the more kind of right faith community. I have 15 churches that agreed to kind of pair with another, doing that in real time, because you can't wait. We're trying to get a kit together on all of the options So far, the courts, thank God, have said, documented, undocumented, you've got due process. We've got to enforce that. Part of what we also have to do is that whether it's healthcare, you take away healthcare, documented or undocumented across the board, and many undocumented don't have access now. You're going to overwhelm the system. You have to make it clear that taking away healthcare from 16 million Americans is going to raise everybody's price. I also think we need, and it will be interesting to see, whether the very businesses that rely on these workers are going to find the courage to step up. You're starting to see that a little bit from ag and hospitality, but we need to kick them in the butt to get them to speak up more. And this again comes back to some of the broken record, but in our system, we have thrown up every kind of logistical hassle possible to slow this bill down and kill it. I still have hope that we can. If we can't, we'll go back to the House and get another bite there. But we've got to come back to litigate, protest, talk to folks who don't agree with us, to say, is this really the kind of America you want? And I don't want to sound Pollyannish, but I do see there is a difference today than even 3 months ago, when law firms and businesses and universities are seeing that if you actually push back, they're still fighting a hell of a lot of us. And we all have to fight in hell of a lot. Yes?
I want to underscore one thing the Senator said a couple of times, coming back to litigation. I think a lot of people don't realize the only person that can sue on behalf of Congress is Mike Johnson. And that's not going to happen. So we need everyone in this room who either has or knows someone who has been affected by what the Trump administration is doing, particularly when he oversteps his authority, to contact our offices, tell us your story so that we can first, I'm on the House Democratic Caucus has a litigation task force where we are partnering with outside organizations to help find people who have standing, who can sue, and then we can support their lawsuit through amicus briefs or other ways. And so if you share your stories with us, and we can help pair you with organizations that are filing lawsuits, we can tell your stories on the House or the Senate floor in committee, put faces to names, or at least communities to names. That helps us do our job when Mike Johnson and the Republicans in the Senate and the House aren't.
We have caseworkers who help on this, but there was also one thing. In this god-awful, cruel bill, there is an effort, and we're going to see whether it kind of gets through the procedural junk, that would suddenly say if you want to try to bring in injunctive relief, you got to post a huge bond. That would undermine the basis of our whole judicial system. Please.
Thank you. My name is Larry. I'm from Chesterfield. And in light of this administration really saying it does not need to obey the rule of law, and the fact that we've seen that justice delayed is justice denied, so litigation doesn't always end up in the right place, and that it's freely willing to use federal forces to impose its will, how are we to feel confident that we're going to have free and fair elections going forward? To help ensure that.
You know, here's the remarkable thing. If you'd asked that question January 25th of this year, I'd say, oh, come on, that's way over the top. I don't think it's way over the top. And we do need poll observers. We need people who work the polls in a nonpartisan way. I go back again in our community, we got to have folks who will step up when it comes to the basic tenets of our democracy. So far, the courts have held. So far, the military And again, I was so worried about that this would have turned into a complete, parade last week that are more appropriate in North Korea or Russia. The military is hell, but I think I gotta do everything I can to reinforce those institutions. And I do think people need to, if you look at our poll workers, most people are aging out. So being that neutral observer that can watch the votes is really important. Frankly, maybe one of the most important things we can do is the way politics works is Virginia's going to be viewed as Trump's first report card. If Abigail, Ghazala, and Jay win by a big margin and we pick up additional seats in the House of Delegates, that message will be received by our Republicans. I know 2 Republican senators that literally, this was worse when Musk was still around. They had to hire personal security because they were going to vote against what Trump wanted. They didn't have the money to do that. If some of this action doesn't lead people off their butts to find their voice, then the scenario you talked about is much more likely. I'm not giving up. You shouldn't give up, but we've got to show up at the polls themselves, both as voters and guarantee the objectivity of it.
My name's Diana from Henrico, and I am a terminated probationary employee. I feel like federal employees are being forgotten, particularly those of us who do not live in Northern Virginia. And I want to know what provisions or what we can do to fight any rework plans that they slip into the bill, the position package, anything like that.
Well, the first piece will be the rescission bill. And this is basically one of the things I thought would get people off their duffs was, in the legislature, whether it's Richmond or Washington, if you're an appropriator that gets to kind of decide where the money actually is spent, if that gets totally ignored, why even have Congress in the first place? So what we've done, and not just in North Virginia, but has been, can we litigate? And then we're seeing time and again that many of the probationary employees are actually being brought back, candidly at a higher cost, which is again now the stupidity of this. The second thing is, we need to get the word out to those folks. The craziness of firing probationary employees is that's the next generation. I mean, I tell you, the place I started, finally got some traction. At the CIA, it cost $340,000 to bring on a new employee. By the time you give them a security check and put up new training, it is complete stupidity to fire the ones who are new in the first 2 years. So we've got them to back off there. But if you'll share with my team which agency you worked with, we can see if we can take it to specific agencies. We need, this echoes what Jay said. We do need your stories, but we also need your permission to use your stories. Because one of the things that happens, this has happened to me, but I am afraid to give you my name. We've got to have the courage that you can let us use your name and your story if we're going to try to resolve something. We have the last question.
Hello, Senator. I'm the Honourable Jennifer Hughes. I'm the Commissioner of the Revenue of Chesterfield County, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Mr. Atkins for standing up and asking that question. I just qualified for Social Security this year. I have a 21-year-old son, and he is exactly where Ms. Atkins' son and all the young people she referenced is. So I have another question. The late Jerry Connolly served his constituents very well. He was incredibly popular. I would say, as a representative in government, you have a job description, and the first thing on that list, I think, is that you actually are there to represent your people. Right? If you can't do that anymore, and I would suggest that Representative Connolly probably had some inkling that he was not well. And by the way, I've met Jerry Connolly, and he was a wonderful person. Why did he run again? There are 2 empty congressional seats in Texas. Both of those representatives passed away from illnesses that happened in older age. It wasn't a surprise. The late Dianne Feinstein was known to have a fairly aggressive form of Alzheimer's by the time she passed away in her 90s. There are a lot of other examples of people who we hold in high esteem. President Joe Biden, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Okay. Is there a God complex in the Democratic Party? Do you all? Any other business, including my office, and I have let a couple of people go because they were no longer able to perform their duties. What's going on?
Well,
Oh, and by the way, your answer about they'll just fire us, I find it rather simplistic given the barriers to running for election, like the amount of money it takes, I feel pretty safe about running for another term, at which point my son rolled his eyes and said, "Hey Mom, maybe you should eat your own dog food."
only, I hear you, Jennifer. I would simply say, my memory of this was that Jerry Connolly, when he ran, didn't know the cancer diagnosis. And respectfully, when you mentioned the person in Texas, I went to law school with Sylvester Trump. He dropped dead the night, I think, of the State of the Union speech. No one had any idea, including Sylvester. So, the other cases you cite, amen. And again, I put my money where my mouth was when very few other people did on Biden. And again, the proof is, you say, well, that's true. Biden called me out on national TV. So the question is, how do you trade off experience? How do you trade off getting stuff done with that notion? I don't know where you set this. You want to put an age requirement, nobody goes past 80, sign me up. But the idea that we're going to suddenly dictate when people's due date expires, I'm not sure is the right approach either. And respectfully again, I will match my record of what I've delivered for Virginia in this job with anyone. And a lot of that came as I understood more about the national security implications, the technology piece of what's going on in competition. And I actually, at the end of the day, still, Jennifer, trust the way the system works. We've seen people get done. And if that is the will of people, so be it. But this is this is not a new problem. But to your point that there are some who overstay their welcome, hey, frickin' men. I see it. The stories I can tell you. Please.
Hello, my name is Tim Bronstetter. I'm a teacher of U.S. history, so I'll fight every fiber in my being to be brief. The U.S. Constitution is clear that the only body that can declare war is Congress.
Yeah, that's right!
Congress has not done so since World War II. So that means they have given up on that power since World War II. You just mentioned how dangerous foreign policy by tweet is. So my question to you would be, would you be willing to sign one of the acts like Bernie Sanders' No War with Iran Act, or the similar one by Tim Kaine, to prevent war with Iran?
I think the Tim Kaine War Powers Resolution is a much stronger and better tool. And remember, the war, as a history teacher, War Powers Act was set up because Congress wasn't doing its job. But in the interim, what we've also got to do is demand that this guy, before he puts our people in harm's way, because I can assure you the intelligence has not changed about Iran actually making a decision to move towards a bomb. They have enriched additional uranium, but they have not moved towards a bomb. So what is the fact that would suddenly put us in that conflict? He has not given us that. We're going to pound the out of it next week. But I do think the War Powers Act is the right way to go. And Tim, I give Tim, and Tim has done this. Tim should get credit. Tim was willing to raise this when Obama was president. And you know, and again, it's where you test somebody is when they're willing to go against their own team. Yes, please.
And actually, I work for you. I work for the tax department, and I'm a member of the government.
Bless you.
Us two here. We're doing governmental employees. So, yeah. But my question is, it's twofold. Right? Everybody says Biden is too old. Trump is too old. More amended, whatever, than Biden was ever. So why is he not? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, now 25th Amendment, except they were stuck with pants. I don't know. He's younger, but I don't know that he's much better. He isn't. And also, I know in the bill, that bill, there's a bunch of policy items in there, like getting rid of, like, I think, and also corruption. I mean, not corruption, contempt. How can, what are you, is that been struck out by?
Yeah, there have been one of the bad ones in terms of the ability to have a court order extend beyond the immediate jurisdiction. That got struck out. This next one about posting a bomb has not been yet. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. There was one on the food assistance that literally, this was like how what a sham so much of this is. That basically says on food assistance called SNAP, to help pay for school breakfasts, school lunches. We're going to transfer from the feds to the state a $300 million administrative cost each year. I did see this morning that got struck out yesterday. So we're going to keep on this. This is called the bird bath, and I could even make our history professor's eyes roll back in his head if we try to explain all the bird bath. But we're getting a few out, but at the end of the day, this is not a bill that can be saved. We got to defeat this bill come hell or high water.
Hi, my name is Karen, and I'm represented by Jennifer McClellan. Thank you very much. I love this country, and I know I speak for everybody. And the things that I love and I feel like are the heart of what I love about this country are our representative democracy, our public lands, our social security network, our compassion, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And my perspective is that our Republican representatives have lost their heart. And if it was a reason that I could understand, like perhaps lowering the federal deficit, which we know is not happening, then maybe there would be some saving grace. I don't see that, and we know that that's a lie anyway. Can you please help me understand how we can help Republicans feel connected to the people in this land again in a way that lets them represent us more effectively?
Well, great question. Why don't we look at, I want to close on your question, but I want to get this question first, and then because I think you asked the gazillion-dollar question.
Good afternoon, Senator. My name is Sheila Mickelson, and
Congresswoman McClellan represents me also, in fact.
I do too.
I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to come before you. In fact, I'm from the hinterland. I'm from Hopewell, in case you So we have something to say too. I'm going to build upon her question, and that is, I'm a retired accountant. Numbers matter, data matters, the deficit matters. This bill that we have before us, and it's before us people here in this audience, not just our representatives. We will never, ever, ever recover if this bill passes in terms of actually addressing the deficit. It's untenable, which I think that you well know, as well as the Congresswoman. My question to you, as an accountant, in terms of our feasibility as a nation, economically, where do we stand in terms of Democrats actually having a strategy to defeat this bill? When we were, months and months ago, we were seeing Democrats going into Republican districts and really addressing the issues, and that fervor seems to have died down. We see in the news media maybe 4 or 5 senators, Congresswoman McClellan, my good friend Maxine Waters fighting daily, and we're just not getting the coverage in the media that we need to bring constituents along and actually get information out to the other side, which everyone keeps saying we need to talk to. Republicans are not experiencing consequences right now. They're in lockstep with Trump. And it's up to us really to change that. So again, my question to you is, what is the Democratic strategy to deal with H.R. 1?
Okay, well, couple comments that I want behind it. First of all, again, first day of summer, we all have other things to do, and I'm so grateful everybody here. 2, on the debt and deficit, I make the joke that I work in the only place in America where being a gang member is a good thing. Because in the Senate, whenever there's a bipartisan group, it's called the gang of this, gang of that. My first gang was the Simpson Bowles gang, that when the debt was going to hit, oh my God, it's going to hit 17 trillion.
Now it's 26.
No, now it's 36 and going higher. And I belong to the smallest minority in the Senate. I can read a balance sheet. And I know my numbers. Truth is, on the debt and deficit, neither party has credibility. If we don't acknowledge that it's going to take more revenues, we have the lowest percentage of revenues of any industrial country. Of the 34 industrial countries in the world, we're 31st. And on some of these, I did a political heresy earlier when I said, we got to acknowledge, because our life expectancy is going on, that maybe folks under 35 may have to wait an extra year or 2 to get Social Security. Nobody wants to hear anything that isn't more free stuff. In my fear times, if the Democratic Party has been the party of, we're going to promise you all this free stuff, and then people didn't end up seeing any of their lives. So they thought, well, maybe this, spoiled billionaire who suddenly can affiliate with them is going to touch. I think a lot of those folks, I think there's a lot of buyer's remorse. Not a day that goes by that I don't talk to someone that says, I voted for Trump. Damn, this is not what I wanted. I also think in terms of the Democrats, and I'll go back to what I said, on the bill, we got to get 4 more senators, and we're down to like the next 10 days. And whether any of these ones who say, oh, Mark, I agree, this is awful, but if they don't, they need to get fired. I also think we have to, as those of us who are Democrats in the room, and this is a kind of open season, this is not a Democrat, but this is why I'm here as your U.S. Senator. People who disagree can be here, fine. Obviously, we've had a few disagreements. But I think the worm is turning. I think the worm is turning. When you see the universities who are starting to fight back, when you see the law firms who say we're not going to simply give in and start to fight back, when you see the court decisions of 37 cases, I think we got 35 that we have won, I come into this still with optimism. Are we going to get this bill defeated? I don't know. Will the people in the House who promise that they'll never vote for something unless it has X amount of SALT deduction in it? Will they have the courage of their convictions? I can't guarantee you that. When we see the kind of anti-immigrant flavor that is going to completely disrupt our economy, people are going to see that at the bottom line. But what I think we need to do, and why this gives me energy, is because you're here. You know, we live in the greatest country in the world. We should acknowledge that. Democrats should take back the flag, take back patriotism, take back the sense that we are a compassionate country that is about giving people their fair shot. I think we have, for way too many times, been reluctant to be patriotic in a traditional sense. And you know, the flag is not something that Donald Trump gets to possess. And I thought it was great about some of the No Kings rallies. Saw the Charlottesville ones, saw the ones in Northern Virginia. The number of people waving American flags. You know, and sometimes we have not been willing to acknowledge what's good about our country. Plenty of things wrong, but still, we are the only country in the world where people will literally put their lives on the line to break into America, to touch a little bit of what we take for granted every day. So I'm not going to give up or stop fighting. I'm not going to give up on trying to convince, in their own freaking self-interest or their state self-interest, some of the senators who I'm dealing with on a daily basis to find that courage. And we have a chance, frankly, we have a more unique chance than virtually anywhere else in the country. Because the only state that's going to be viewed as a report card on Donald Trump this year is the Commonwealth of Virginia. So if we come out and run the numbers for Abigail Spanberg, for Ghazal Hashmi, for Jay Jones, for those House Authority members, I can tell you, when we get a big margin, suddenly a lot of my Republican friends are going to find religion. Find religion. The challenge that I had, the challenge that would, and again, if I was good, I'd stop right there and say thank you very much. The thing that I worry about is, among everything that's been raised, and everyone, I appreciate how everybody's raised a question. I appreciate the fact we've all been respectful with each other, whether we fully agree or not. But the thing that haunts me as much as anything is I know this country isn't Trump's image. I know this country, we are a more decent people. But how much structural damage is going to get done before Trump implodes? How many countries in the world are never going to view America the same way? How much of that moral leadership that, frankly, the rest of the world, I love our friends in Europe, but the idea that the European Union is going to lead the whole world, they got dysfunctional politics too. You know, the idea that we're going to stop this research. I think about the young lady who's got the cancer, and God bless the fact that because of that research, it sounds like you're still here 9 years from when you got diagnosed. Some of those things, even when you change policy, you can't put back in the bottle. And I gotta believe, and this is where I'm saying, yes, it is important for elected officials to do their part, but it's equally important that you all do your part, and part of that means having those conversations with people that don't agree with us. It means, like the young lady from Amelia said, don't simply think Democrats are going to run up the score in Northern Virginia, the Richmond area, and Hampton Roads, and leave behind rural America. That would be a recipe for disaster, even if we win. Because then we write off a whole lot of Americans around the rest of the country, truly be a competitive party. And it means And this goes back to the gentleman who raised the Palantir question. Technology is coming at us. This is where I think, again, respectfully, around, it's not simply your age, but how engaged you are with the future. And I will match my credentials on understanding and being scared to death as well in certain times about all the technology that's going to transform our life. Because you think social media has been big? You ain't seen nothing yet with AI coming down the path. And we need leaders who are frankly not afraid of it, but recognize there's an upside on it, but also a downside. That hopefully can reason on how we figure out that we get a hell of a lot more of the upside and less of the downside. But you guys coming out on a Saturday morning reinforce that hope. You've got, in these elected officials, I think, extraordinary people. They have a vision for Virginia, in Jen's case, a vision for America that we need to carry forward. And the most important thing is that, I know when the news comes on, most people want to throw a shoe at the TV. I feel that same way, and I'm inside the TV sometimes. What we can't do is give up. The thing that the people, the Trump, or frankly even some, because I don't like the far extremes on either end of the political agenda, because they never get anything done. The way we ought to be measured is how we get things done that affect people's lives, so that this young lady here can have the same kind of fair chance that I had as a public school kid, come from a family with no money, wouldn't have gotten through school without student debt. But we got to also break some classes on the way. And we need to acknowledge that sometimes we can improve government service. Sometimes there is ways that we can be more kind of forward. But I am not going to lose hope. I am not going to lose faith. Your presence here reconfirms that. So please, give yourselves a hand, and can we give our elected, and we give our votes to the best side,